Hey guys, I'm Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Castoria. Now, you're probably sitting here thinking, oh, it's another video telling me to roll. Well, kind of, you should. But instead today we're going to focus more on how to use her. I see all sorts of confusion about how it is that she's supposed to function, or what MP levels we're supposed to get of her, or even the DPS. So I'm going to address all of that for you today to kind of give you some idea about how to use her properly. So we're going to go ahead and start out today by talking about Artoria Caster's kit, because I think that's a good thing to understand so that you guys have an idea of how she functions on a base level. So again, we're going to see here with the attack stat right away, she's kind of got on the lower end for a 5-star at only 10.5k. This would be very high for a 4-star if that's what she was, but obviously she's not. Again, though, she's a support, so we don't expect her to be doing too much damage in terms of like raw carding potential and obviously NP damage. She doesn't have a damage dealing NP, so we don't need to worry about that from that perspective. Again, though, I think you'll find this is perfectly adequate, especially with all the buffs she has. Now, if you look here as well, she also has 14.4k HP. This is again beefy for a 5-star. It's definitely on the better end of things, and it's good to have this much, especially on a support caster where you know they're probably going to be taking a beating, getting targeted by certain AI in the fights, and definitely someone you want to keep alive, especially since Artoria Caster doesn't have healing latently in her kit in order to help keep her up. You also see she has a 0.54 NP gain rate, and while this may be on the lower end, this is pretty average for a lot of units to have somewhere around the 0.5 range. And don't worry about that. Again, that might seem low, but she has everything in her kit that she needs in order to generate NP very well, and it's something that I have just been truly amazed with using her over time. Again, the rest of the stuff is pretty standard here. She is alignment neutral good, female gendered, and has the Arthur, Fae, female humanoid, round table knight, saber face, servant, and if she is an NPC, also the Fae trait as well during story. So again, as you guys look here at the overall deck, triple arts, pretty much what we've come to expect for most of our support casters over time, and this is definitely welcome to see, as it's going to be one of the most strong aspects of Castoria, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But just so you guys can see, she has 3-hit counts on all of her card types here, and so that is perfect. That is average for what we expect, and combined with her other abilities to enhance her NP gain, I think that is going to definitely be really nice. So nothing here that's too standoutish, just nothing that's bad either. As we go to look at her first skill here, she gets Charisma of Hope B. Again, she actually has 20% attack up and 30% NP charge up. So this is what makes her so strong here. This is all party wide. So the attack up is 3 turns here. But I want you guys to think proactively right now about how it is that you could use a 30% party wide charge for Castoria, how it is that you could use that to your advantage. And a lot of that results in double Castoria setups. As you guys know, whenever we get to these support casters, a lot of the common setups are to use one sort of DPS nuker or looper or someone like that, and basically to have the support carry them in terms of their charge needs throughout the node. Well, in Castoria's case, she gives you all the tools that you need to do that and then some. So she can either charge herself by doing this, and like if you consider a double Castoria setup right there just off this skill, both Castorias have 60% charge. Or you could also do a plug suit rotation. This is a very common tactic I see for 90+ nodes, where you're using one DPS and then a second DPS with a Castoria in the 3rd slot, and then you're rotating that Castoria for another Castoria. What that allows you to do is, again, get more charge onto 2 DPSs, and then if they have some charge skills to supplement, they might be able to make it do. Or again, later on down the line, we also see that append skills come into play a lot here, as again, if you start off your DPS or your Castoria even with an append skill, both of those double 30% charges are going to end up taking you all the way to 80%. So there's not a whole lot we have to do in order to finish them off. In fact, if you had 2 DPS that way for that setup we were talking about, you could actually split the second skill that we're about to go over on those units and get another 20% charge for each of them, making them both able to NP on turn 1. That is really strong, especially considering we're coming from 0% starting charge. This is partially what makes Castoria so good for people out there in the long run. I see everybody talking about how broken she is with her NP and everything, and while I understand that it is a very strong capability, I think ultimately it's the efficiency is what drives everybody to using Castoria in the long run. And you see, even when the Buster meta comes around later on again, it still doesn't totally replace Castoria because of how good she is. So this is my word of caution to you guys that are possibly considering skipping her, because you maybe think, oh, well, I'll be fine. I will either pick her up later or try to get, you know, the Buster supports and just go with the Buster system. You guys are going to want Castoria. Not only does she really actually tangibly make the game a lot easier, which anybody that's kind of speaking ill of her, that's what all support casters do. But she also is definitely going to be useful right away when she comes out, and certainly in terms of efficiency is going to mark a huge jump for a lot of people. You're going to see a lot of lotto comps starting to rely on her into the future. You're going to see a lot of people running her for max efficiency in their events just because they can now do it from 0% starting charge. And what that does, guys, the reason that's so important, that opens up all those craft essence slots for, again, event CEs, damage Cs, bonding Cs, whatever it is that you want to put. You're no longer restricted in most cases to having to have specific things on your DPS or on your support casters if you don't so choose. Again, there's definitely harder content that might require it, but for just your standard 3-3-3 node sort of layout, yeah, we're pretty good for most of our units. Most units function really well in the Castoria system, and those that don't, we have plug suit for them. So there's still going to be the option of taking a third support, like a waiver maybe that you've gotten off your SSR ticket, wink wink, or maybe like a Reigns or somebody else, even like a Scotty, that can also help get that supplemental charge and get this ball rolling. So even if your unit struggles, this is still really good. Now, all of that was just about the NP charge there. The attack stat here is definitely not the greatest. It's only 20%, but it's still fairly good and pretty much what we've come to expect. This is a little bit of a similar skill to like Merlin's, again, in that regard. So it's still better than nothing. I will definitely take it, and it's 3 turns long, so you get a lot of good coverage out of it. Again, all of this is on a 6-turn cooldown, which is definitely not bad either. Now we get to her second skill here. And as you guys can see, she gets the charge to one ally's NP gauge by another 20%, and then she gets NP gain rate for 3 turns for the party by 30%. So that right there in and of itself is already strong. But the fact that it's party wide is so really amazing at this point, because it does mean that, again, in that sort of multiple DPS scenario, everyone is getting that benefit when this is on. Even Castoria, if she needs to card to try and get to her NP, is going to have the ability to get more NP gain. And so that's why I was saying you guys don't necessarily have to worry about that NP gain stat on Castoria, because I have seen her just go from 0 to 100 in one brave chain of triple arts there. And yeah, that probably doesn't sound that amazing. There's plenty of units that can do it, but I want you to think about that and the potential looping potential in those cards. So that is really, really good. Doubly so nowadays with stuff like command codes that can really help out. Again, all of this as well is going to be on a 5-turn cooldown, so very low, very quick to get back, and definitely one of the good parts about this. Now, remember, this is targeted too for the charge here, so like I was explaining earlier with that charge distribution, you guys might be able to put it on one unit or another, or again, even on Castoria herself, because even if your unit were to be all the way at their NP, but you wanted them to have really good NP gain, you could put this skill on another unit and it will still affect the unit that's about to NP. So that's why it's such a great and versatile skill here. And then we get to her third skill now. And this one is, again, one that is often talked about because it is not only just a 50% art steroid for 3 turns for a target, it is also going to increase their threat against humanity damage for 3 turns by 50%. That right there is strong, but it's actually the least known aspect of this, because the other aspect here is it's a targeted spot invuln. And you might be thinking, wow, that is really nice, but it's only 1 turn. It's not party wide like Merlin's is. Well, hold on to your seatbelt here, because it's going to get even better than this. But just keep this in mind that you do get a targeted normal invuln right here with this skill. So that in and of itself is nice, even though it is only the one turn. And then if you think about it now we've got a 30% charge skill with 20% damage up. We've got a 20% charge skill with 30% NP gain. And now we have a 3-turn 50% art steroid. So this is setting people up really good for damage potential as well as looping. One of the big criticisms that I've seen of Castoria and why she is so good is the fact that she basically takes a lot of the kits of the other arts casters and combines them for your usefulness. So that is really good because it means you don't have to take the Tamamo and the Nero Bride, the Tamamo and the Waver. You get it all in one package, and that is super, super good. Now, again, I'm going to talk about this here in a little bit. You don't have to worry about certain units dying out due to Castoria, at least not the ones you're thinking of. So that is something that really she just excels at, is just doing everything kind of all in one tight-knit package there. Again, this is also going to be on a 6-turn cooldown, so you can see everything here is 6 turns or less. It's all very low, very quick and easy to get back, and that's also something that is really, really nice about her in combination with another unit that you're probably thinking about. So again, she gets magic resistance A here, she gets territory creation EX, and this is definitely going to be nice for her arts performance. So again, that's also going to help the NP gain that we were talking about. She gets increased critical damage of her arts cards by 10%. She definitely hits hard with them, I've noticed over time. And then she also gets Fey Eyes A, which increases her own critical attack chance resistance by 20% after she has cleared LB6. So this is also really good because this means that she actually becomes tankier as a caster. It means that she is not going to get nearly as, kicked in as some of the other support casters will with regards to crits. Because you guys know a stray crit on your support casters, especially from an AI that maybe is like really got a hard on for him and targeting them really hard, is definitely going to be a concern. Just going over her appends here, again, she does get extra attack finesse improvement. This is pretty standard par for the course for everyone, just like the second skill is here in a second. But again, just with a word about this is not her best, most useful append skill in my opinion, but it is actually a pretty decent one. I have taken Castoria into plenty of grail fronts and soloing type situations where she was sort of the last man standing and I had to kind of eke things out. And yeah, this could actually really help her in that regard if you wanted to go for it, if you had the servant coins from rolling multiple copies down the line. So again, this can be useful to her. I have noticed her that she can be quite a monster in those grail fronts. Then we get to the second skill here, and that's mana loading. I talked about this earlier with regards to the first skill, but again, mana loading is just the ability to start the battle with up to 20% more gauge. It's very, very strong. And the reason I wanted to talk about this in particular for Castoria is because one of the really good, nice strategies involving her is that you guys actually can start with 20% charge, do double Castoria. That gets her to 80% right there. And then all you have to do without even targeting with the second skill is find some kind of arts chain to get her that free 20% charge. So again, considering you're probably going to be looping her with an arts looper, that gives you the NP. So you only need to find 2 more cards, one of which needs to be one of her 3 arts cards within the first 2 turns in order to get her to her NP once mana loading comes around. It's something I've talked about. She is actually my first candidate to get mana loading online for, pretty much. There's certainly other really good units to use it for, but this is why it allows me to get to that NP easily and almost automatably. So it's not quite 100% perfect, but it's up there in the span of like 90% plus in terms of likelihood to occur. I have done this for numerous runs in a row, trying to count to see how many times I could do this and see how long it took me to get a failure. I have gone over 30 runs in a row without a failure before, so certainly it is something that you guys can definitely rely upon to a great extent. It won't be 100% perfect, but it will be very strong. Now, why is it strong to get to your NP in the middle of combat? I'm going to talk about that here in a second for her. And then we get to her third skill here. It's anti-saber attack damage aptitude. Honestly, for most people, this third skill is very hit or miss. The one thing I can say is my philosophy with support casters is they're almost always in your party, either one or the other. So having their third append unlocked might not be the worst idea, especially if you had to, again, card against someone. Like, let's say you were just trying to make an arch chain. It just means that Castoria, that Scotty, that Merlin, that Oberon, that Koyanskaya, whoever it is, they're going to probably be doing more if they have to card to help you out. So not the worst in terms of what this skill does, but it's obviously the least strong, in my opinion, of the 3 skills here for Castoria's Appends. And now we get to the actual NP here. So it is a support-based NP. You guys can see it increases the party's attack for 3 turns. That is what makes it very strong right there off the get-go. So it's a base 30% at NP1 and goes all the way up to 50% at NP5. That's actually what's going to scale here with the additional NP levels that you roll of her. And then she will also cleanse the party of any of their debuffs. This is really good. Just be careful. I have noticed, like, you cannot select things in a chain. So like, let's say you were going to do Castoria's NP first, and then you wanted to select your stunned units NP. It will not work. It will not let you select the stunned NP. So even though it would be removed in the order of operations before that point, there are some little caveats there where it's not necessarily going to allow you to pick it. I wish they would adjust that and make the AI smarter like that, but that would probably be too strong. So certainly a very, very nice skill. This definitely makes it nice whenever you're going up against any sort of challenge comp that's very debuff heavy. You're able just to cleanse the entire party right there in one fell swoop. And because you're going to be trying to get off Castoria's NP anyways to protect the party here in a second, that's kind of what makes this so easy to just keep debuffs off of you. Now, if you guys look at her overcharge effect, she also grants anti-purge defense buff for in attacks for 3 turns. I'm going to explain this, but just so you guys understand what anti-purge defense is it is basically true invuln. It is, again, solemn defense as it's known in other sites and stuff. But basically what this does is it ignores invincibility, pierce, and damage. So what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that invuln pierce cannot pierce this special version of invincibility. Again, that is pretty much what everybody ends up saying is the most like broken part about Castoria, because this one effect allows her to really cheese a lot of the content that comes out before her, because a lot of that stuff is reliant upon, oh, I have the ability to pierce you and yada yada yada. I've seen plenty of people that have talked about solutions for this and how they could sort of get away with it, but outside of doing something that's specifically targeted to be anti-Castoria, I don't really see any good solution for how to make this skill less strong in terms of what they could do in combat. I've seen a lot of people say stuff like, oh, well, they can, you know, put bosses that have buff removal and stuff like that, but the problem with that sort of thing is not only does that hurt Castoria, but it also hurts every other type of support even more. So that's kind of why I don't think it's a good solution to try and specifically negate Castoria. But certainly there are fights that this really is struggling with, because if you get a, say, AoE boss that's constantly spamming your party with just AoE hits and they're alone and they're getting all the actions every turn, that is definitely going to chew right through your solemn defense, your anti-purge defense there. So that is definitely a thing. But remember too, it's the in attacks over 3 turns here. And so that in attacks over 3 turns is going to be scaling depending on the overcharge. Now, against that, you guys have an idea about how overcharge works. Remember, overcharge isn't specifically damage boosting. That's all done pretty much by NP levels on most units. So overcharge is something you guys can gain from either getting to 200% charge or higher, right? You can get more ranks of overcharge, or you can set them later in an NP chain, so putting Castoria's NP after another NP, or it's something that you can do with buffs. For instance, something like Morgan Le Fay giving a rank of overcharge after she NPs. That's actually one of the very common uses of Castoria nowadays for challenge content, is this sort of Morgan Le Fay, Merlin, and Castoria comp that really gets you a lot of stacks of solemn defense into the 4 and 5 range depending on what you do. And if you start thinking about that, that's 4 or 5 hits that each of them get where they cannot take any damage, and it makes it hilariously hard for the AI to actually get any sort of effective damage in there, no matter how hard they want to hit. So that's what I'm saying, is it basically takes weird things like an AoE boss or a boss that's solely focused on one unit, either via taunting or weird AI gimmicks, in order to be able to really go through that. That is, again, another thing that just really strengthens her. Though do consider the fact that it only lasts 3 turns. So if at the end of 3 turns you haven't used all your stacks, they fall off. The other weird part about this is, let's say within 3 turns you were to get back to another NP here, it doesn't necessarily matter. You cannot overlap with another thing. So let's say you only had one, but now all of a sudden you've come back to an NP before the 3 turns are up, and you would actually have the capability of getting 4 stacks here. If you were to NP before this 1 falls off, congratulations, all these 4 go to waste. So be careful with that. This is very similar to how other skills like this work, where they have a set duration, or maybe they don't even have a duration, but until they're actually fully expended, you cannot re-up the buff. So don't make the mistake of trying to overlap and ending up wasting it. And now the last thing I wanted to go over with you guys here is Castoria's, again, Bond CE, and that's actually a good thing. As you guys can see, it features flowers here, and that's a good segue for today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Tokyo Treat and Sakuraco. Both of these brands are premier Japanese subscription box services that give you popular Japanese candy and treats that, again, are very delicious. If you've ever been curious to try out some of the authentic flavors of Japan, I highly recommend checking out these brands, as they each offer Japanese exclusive items that you are going to enjoy. In Tokyo Treat's case, that's going to be Japanese exclusive Kit Kats, ramen, and much more. In Sakuraco's case, that's going to be authentic traditional Japanese snacks from local artisan snack makers that are not easy to access. And both of these are going to be delivered straight from Japan to your door. Their goal is to share Japanese culture to the world through the medium of snacking. If you want to enjoy pop Japanese snacks, you can choose Tokyo Treat, but if you want traditional Japanese treats, you can enjoy Sakuraco instead. For both Tokyo Treats and Sakuraco's boxes, they each come with a different theme every month, keeping things exciting and fresh. In Sakuraco's case, the theme for the month is actually the Sakura Festival. It's the April box that, again, is going to make everything in it taste like cherry blossoms. This includes things like Sakura wafers and daifuku, as well as green tea and kanten. You also get Sakura jelly and manju, chili arare, ume arare, and even an award-winning senbei boat. You're also going to get some apple flavors in this to highlight the spring here, so you get an apple jam bun as well as an apple cookie to kind of augment the Sakura flavors and accent it nicely. And last but not least, you'll also get a Sakura side plate that's perfectly sized to hold sweets. The cherry blossom pattern on the plate is ideal to present and enjoy your Sakura season treats alongside that cup of tea you might be having. For me personally, my personal favorite was the Sakura Kuzomochi. It was a whole pickled Sakura blossom encased in a gelatin-like substance, and it was just absolutely perfect and sweet. For Tokyo Treats box, the theme is still Sakura, but it definitely has a lot more flavors due to the snackability of what's in this box. So there's definitely some really tasty stuff like Sakura flavored donut sticks, which again I just had and they're fantastic, as well as the Sakura Karanto and the cupcake as well. You're also going to get some matcha, a Pandoro melon cookie, and some heartful cherry flavored Pocky. So again, you got a lot of nice Tokyo-based treats, but for me, the personal highlight was actually the peach-flavored Kit Kats. I did not think I was going to enjoy these, but let me tell you, they were amazing. So I highly recommend checking out Tokyo Treats box as well, because there's some real awesome goodies that you might never get the opportunity to taste otherwise. Each of these boxes is also going to come with a 24-page cultural guide booklet that explains not only what's in each of the treats, as well as the allergens and things like that, but also where the treats come from and some of the history behind them. It also talks about, in several of the cases, why this is important to Japan for this time of year, as well as, again, some of the backstory of some of the snacks and things that are going on around this time period. So I highly recommend checking these boxes out, as each one of them has some great content for it, not just in the food, but also in terms of history and culture behind it. Most of the boxes come packed to the brim with stuff as well. I was really surprised upon receiving the boxes that there was no real room to fit anything else in them. They definitely seemed stuffed, and for that I was really surprised. Again, I have eaten most of everything in the box, so I can honestly attest to the fact that they are all very delicious snacks that I think you guys will enjoy. I would highly recommend checking out Sakuraco and Tokyo Treat in the links in the description below if you guys are interested in, again, subscribing to this box mailing service. And now just to get back to you here with the Castoria CE, again, the Bond CE's effects are going to give 10% NP gen and attack to the party here while she's on the field, so that's really strong. There's no turn duration to it, but it's not maybe the effect that maybe a lot of people were expecting. Perhaps they were expecting some sort of like arts and NP gain or something, but yeah, still, this is a very nice CE, and the good part about it is it's not specific to a card type. So again, while you maybe lose the extra effectiveness of arts that you might have on this, you do gain the attack up that helps everybody. So if you did have to use Castoria outside of an arts comp, which is a thing, I have definitely seen this certainly be useful to people. So again, considering the fact that a lot of Castoria comps can function from a sort of 0% charge standpoint, this could be very, very, very good in that regard. Now you're probably wondering, but Cad, you said that her attack up buff actually scales with her NP levels. Shouldn't I get higher NP levels? Well, maybe, and that's what I want to go over with you here. So certainly the strongest aspect of Castoria's NP is that anti-purge defense that we talked about, but the attack up here is certainly good. So if you guys get additional NP levels, yes, you can obviously make the attack up buff that she gets in the middle of combat work for you. So why would I want higher NP levels? A lot of people will say, hey, wait, I can get to the NP naturally within the course of 3 turns, so why don't I do this to boost performance? This is something you absolutely can do. It's just up to you as to whether or not you want to do it. So certainly for in a challenge scenario, you're going to be wanting to do it. If you're in a normal farming scenario, you might, and it just depends on you. So if the difference between you clearing and not is Castoria popping this MP, you're probably going to want to do that. You're probably going to want to get it out ahead of that maybe 3rd turn there with the really high health values and make it so that your NP1 unit can actually do the job. Now, I haven't seen too many instances where it's like, oh man, that's just way too weak now with double Castoria to work, but certainly there have been a couple where it's like, yeah, I had to card things out and it might have saved me that, but it's just up to you, right? Maybe if it can get rid of some of the RNG, it might be worth popping the NP there within just a normal 3-turn farm. Now, again, do you have to have a higher NP level for this? Well, that's up to you. I mean, right here, you guys can already see you get 10% extra attack power added just by getting NP2 here. But honestly, I'm going to tell you guys the biggest reason to potentially get an NP2 of Castoria is more that you can easily reach one higher overcharge. You guys can actually, by getting NP2, get to the 200% naturally. And then 2 is you're also giving her the ability to go beyond 100% in the case of fighting annoying enemies that maybe drain. This is definitely something that has happened with like ghost enemies and stuff in the past, or bosses that can spam their skills. So be very careful about that. Having an NP2 can certainly be worth it. And I think out of all the support casters outside of, say, like down the line with like Oberon and Koyanskaya that actually have damage dealing NPs, I think out of all the support casters that have a support NP, Castoria to me makes the most sense to have more NP levels of. That being said, you do not have to have NP2 Castoria. I have seen people definitely be super effective with just an NP1 over time. Just having the unit alone is the by far greatest asset to your Chaldea. So you definitely want to make sure that you actually just acquire her before you start trying to get greedy and going after more copies. It is certainly something you can do. It will certainly benefit you, but you do not have to do it. And certainly you're going to be better off by just having her. And then the other one I see people talk about all the time is, okay, well, what do we do in terms of these units now that I had that are now defunct due to Castoria? They're dead. They're no longer able to be used. They're not. I don't know why people say that. In fact, I'm going to say that most of the people saying that they're dead are either overly sensationalist or just don't play JP. This is something I see regurgitated over and over again by word of mouth. And most of the time, the people that say these things don't actually know, is what I've noticed. So again, I have found numerous instances where I have ended up using someone like, say, Tamamo, and again, you guys can actually see here that one of the best parts about Tamamo is that her NP actually reduces the party skill cooldown. So we were just sitting there talking about how Castoria has short skill cooldowns already anyways, everything 6 turns and less. And now all of a sudden, when we pair her with Tamamo, we get the 2 things that Castoria is really missing. One of those being healing. So not only does Tamamo have a targeted spot heal for your DPS, or even potentially Castoria herself should she get in trouble, but you also have the ability to reduce party cooldowns right here and charge the party even more on the back end of her NP. All of that is going to be useful in combination with your own Castoria. So certainly you guys are going to find yourself in scenarios where Castoria is just getting her shit kicked in and doesn't have enough sort of staying power, because maybe again it's one of those AoE bosses or somebody with taunt or something that's kind of messing up her solemn defense. And so maybe double Castoria is sort of just getting chipped away at and doesn't have enough sustain to live for enough turns to clear the fight. So that is something I see all the time, and in these sorts of cases it's a really good idea to bring in a Tamamo, because Tamamo reduces the skill cooldowns, gets the charge happening even more, so that's allowing at least the one Castoria to still get to an NP even faster than she already was, even though you're lacking the other Castoria. And then certainly you have the healing that can help keep you up even though you might have taken some chip damage here and there, and allows you to actually have staying power in that system. So Tamamo is certainly not dead. I'm not sure why anyone says that. And then also Merlin. Merlin is probably the odd man here, because you might be thinking, oh, well, he doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He's Buster, right? Yeah, well, again, look at his deck here. It's that triple art, same as Tamamo was. He does give charge. He does give a whole lot of beneficial stuff. And even maybe when that Castoria NP isn't ready yet, you still have his skill-based party-wide invuln that can help people as long as you're not facing an invuln pierce. So then again, one of the best things I like about Merlin is arguably just the best healer in the game. His sustain is insane, and especially the fact that it helps you get back to another NP repeatedly allows you to just sit there and keep stacking these NPs on themselves in order to get even more healing over time. So it's very common to see Merlin NPs looping over the top of each other, again even seeing 2 or even 3 at a time stacked on top. And then certainly you guys can see here too, he's also going to help in another aspect that a lot of arts comps need, and that's star generation. He's just going to automate that. Again, especially if you guys are doing something like that Morgan Le Fay comp there, where everybody gets a rank of overcharge. So a lot of how that works is you do Morgan Le Fay, Merlin, and then Castoria in an NP chain. And so what that does is Morgan Le Fay gets off her NP, that gives the Merlin behind a rank of overcharge. So he goes from 100 to 200 right there based off that. But the fact that he's also second in the chain gets him another rank, putting him at 300% overcharge right there. So you're just getting 15 stars per turn right there on that. Now imagine you manage to overlap these, because again, everything in Merlin's NP lasts 5 turns. So all of a sudden now you're getting 30 stars per turn right there. And that is definitely something that will happen. You guys will actually find that one of the most limiting aspects of that comp is the Castoria 3-turn duration of her solemn defense. So about every 3 turns, you're going to be doing it again and NPing, because you're actually going to be waiting most of the time due to how easy it is to get to the NPs. So because of that, you can pretty much almost guarantee that you will be sitting there at about 30 stars per turn over time there. And there may be a turn or 2 where it falls off some, but that's very, very good in terms of generating crits and in terms of actually hitting the enemies hard, even if you are in sort of a turtle comp there. So again, it's one of the more common solutions that I see in terms of party comps for dealing with annoying stuff. But like I was explaining earlier with Tamamo, there may be scenarios where you just can't take double Castoria. Either it's a forced support, or maybe it's a no duplicates type of scenario. It doesn't matter. The whole point is the more of these support casters you guys have, the better. So these 2 are certainly not dead in that regard. There are certainly other units that I would be concerned with though. I've seen a lot of people over time say people like Iris Veal are certainly in trouble due to Castoria, but I think, like, yeah, while that can be true, Jeanne d'Arc is to me one of the ones that I see that's really sort of hampered by this. And the reason I don't say necessarily Iris Veal is because Iris Veal does Guts, and Guts is a restorative skill, not a defensive skill. So anything that removes defensive buffs that will strip solemn defense and invuln and stuff like that won't remove Guts. So there's still some occasional uses for that. But Jeanne d'Arc has certainly an issue here where, again, her overall kit is not the greatest at this current moment in time. She's definitely a year 1 servant that hasn't gotten too much in the way of upgrades. And you guys can see, while she did get the upgrade to her NP to remove her stun, a lot of what she does is pretty much just a tankier form of Castoria. It's a party-wide invuln for 1 turn, party defense for 3 turns, and then debuff removal right here as well. So the debuff removal is all the same. The party-wide invuln is technically the same, although it's 1 turn rather than 1 time. And unfortunately, hers can be pierced where Castoria's can't. Castoria's can also be overcharged for more stacks where John's maybe can't. So there is a bit of a trade-off there. Sometimes 1 turn is better, where you maybe have that AoE boss that's going to sit there and pound you. That wouldn't eat up any, quote, stacks. The problem is Castoria is a lot better at handling just sort of the normal setup of enemies, where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna hit that one on the left and then that one on the right, and so like it's just slowly chipping away at stacks. It's not actually making any progress on the party's health. So a lot of what that does is it preserves some of those stacks for later turns and allows you to still have a lot of staying power. Whereas again, John's just kind of goes away after that turn, and so you're kind of stuck holding the bag and hoping for the best and hoping that the defense is enough here. Again, the scaling on John's NP is actually pretty ridiculous and definitely needs to be looked at over time here, because 5% for NP1 is basically nothing compared to the 25%. So you get, a quarter damage reduction versus basically a 20th damage reduction right there. This is definitely going to help chip away at damage coming into the party. This is going to be very, very minuscule for the offset that it gives. And then again, here you guys can see the overcharge effect is actually her healing in John's case. It can certainly be made to be strong. Unfortunately, it only lasts 2 turns. So that is something else that I think they could really give more staying power to. Maybe turn it into a Merlin type deal with 5 turns. But again, I'm not here to necessarily knock John, other than say she needs some upgrades, and it's certainly one of the units is affected negatively by Castoria's release. But certainly, going back to talking about Castoria here, you guys are definitely going to want to acquire her. You guys are going to want to put her in those sort of like, again, like I said, DPS 1, DPS 2, and then double Castoria with plug suit type comp. That's very good for your 90+. And then certainly the Castoria DPS and then Castoria comp there is also the very common use that I see of her. So again, your major goals when using Castoria is to just get the party up and online, get them looping, get that nuker sort of going. But then certainly Castoria works really well over time with her ability to protect you guys. So I hope you guys found that informative. Again, if you did, make sure you guys check me out on Twitch. I use her all the time. You guys can come in and ask me any questions. I've been using her for 2 years now in terms of JP, so I am well familiar with how she works. Again, I hope to see you guys for the next one. Have a good day. Peace.